Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and start the webinar now. This is the T5 training series that Texas PACE Authority hosts each third Thursday since back in the spring. Today, our focus is PACE for property owners, and a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, if you haven't already, please self-mute yourself and disable your video to preserve bandwidth. This will be more of a presentation than a discussion. We won't probably have time for live Q&A today, but if you have questions afterwards or during, please shoot me an email at my email address there. We'll post those questions as well as answers on our website so everyone can benefit from those. We'll have the recording available later on the TPA website. If you attend today, you'll earn an hour PDH certificate, which will be sent to you along with a post-webinar survey and a copy of the slides that we'll be using. So you don't have to write down things furiously as we go through. You'll be provided the slides later, but do take notes and we can follow up on those things later. And your input and feedback is always welcome. So again, thanks for joining today. So PACE for property owners, part of TPA's third Thursday at 2 training series. I'm Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas PACE Authority. I joined TPA back in February after serving over a couple of decades in the public sector, running the State Energy Conservation Office most recently, where we did a lot of public sector retrofit projects. And then prior to that, had experience in the commercial real estate sector, property appraisal, and tax consulting. So PACE kind of ties together those two worlds of mine and my history, and it's an exciting place to be right now. The Texas PACE Authority, if you're not familiar with it, we are a nonprofit administrator of PACE programs in the state of Texas. So we don't provide the financing, we don't execute the projects, we facilitate the projects. We work for local governments and really serve as their extended staff. And we are a nonprofit, a 501c3 created in Texas specifically for this purpose. And we serve exclusively cities and counties in the state of Texas in managing their PACE programs. The third Thursday at 2 series, which we started back in April, videos of the prior trainings and different focused on different areas are on our website. You can look at those there. This one will also be recorded and we'll have it posted there as well. So if you have colleagues or other interested parties that weren't able to make it in person today, there'll be another opportunity for them to watch the webinar and learn from it later. So our agenda today, and pretty ambitious, I recognize, but we're going to try to cover all aspects of PACE and from a property owner's perspective, assuming you don't have a lot of background for PACE going in. Now, looking at the registration list, I appreciate the fact that many folks who have registered are very familiar with PACE, so this may be a review for some of you, but I also see a lot of new names and faces, and I'm going to provide sufficient background where I think we can at least all be at the same starting point moving forward. So these are the topics we'll cover today, and again, the slides will be provided to you later. So first of all, what is PACE and where is PACE? So PACE is an acronym that stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And what's missing is the financing, because it's really a financing platform. Simple way of paying for capital projects that have a longer term payback with no money out of pocket. So providing long-term 100% financing. And for energy efficiency or energy savings, water conservation, water savings projects, and distributed energy projects. In Texas, PACE is eligible for use in the commercial sector, including nonprofits. Later, we'll see a case study or two involving nonprofit facilities. Industrial, so manufacturing, agricultural, and then multifamily. So not residential, not single family, but multifamily. So apartments, 5 units or more are eligible. And the key to this all, and what makes really PACE different, is it's repaid via a special assessment on the property that aligns with the useful life of the improvements. So you can stretch those financing payments out to match the benefits of the project over time. It was created under state law, the Local Government Code, Chapter 399. Local governments then enable PACE at the local level if they determine that a city or a county or special district want to offer this for property owners in their communities. And it's voluntary and open market, meaning that this is not a regulatory program at all. If a property owner wants to utilize PACE, it's a tool in the tool chest. An open market means that any contractor, any capital provider, and any owner can participate. So there's no set list or pre-qualified list of contractors that you must use or financing providers, etc. So totally open market. At the national level, where is PACE? Well, it's enabled, again, by state legislation in 37 different states plus DC. And of those 37, there are active programs in 24. Texas is one of those. The PACE statute in Texas passed in 2013, and it took a year or two to sort of ramp things up and provide some structure around the program. And we're now really sort of in the sixth year of active operations in the state. Looking at Texas specifically, our group, the Texas PACE Authority, currently serves 55 different cities and counties around the state. And here's the map. We had a new one just add this week, some larger, some smaller. This week, the city of Poteet, which is not even on the map yet, just southwest of San Antonio, created its PACE program, and we're administering the program for them. So it's growing, and even in spite of some of the COVID-related constraints and slowdown in the business sector generally, we are seeing new cities and counties want to offer PACE in their jurisdictions ongoing. So this is a trend that's certainly continuing. Again, at the national level, and this is in the commercial PACE market only. Some states do offer residential, 2 or 3, I believe. Texas is not one of those. So this is for commercial PACE only. About 2,500 projects, almost a couple of $1 billion of investment, very significant job creation. Just the nature of PACE projects, funding energy efficiency, water conservation, et cetera. These are, not jobs that can be outsourced. These are on-site jobs, so electrical contractors, MEP services, HVAC technicians, engineers, new jobs that this investment is supporting. And again, nationally, about half of the projects have been energy efficiency projects. About a quarter have been renewable energy, some a blend, and then also some states like Florida can offer financing for resiliency projects like hurricane hardening, and in California, they can provide financing for seismic hardening. So we don't have those features in Texas, but they're, again, nationally, some of the states tailor their programs to meet those local needs. Here in Texas, cumulatively, about $120 million of investment to date. And if you look at the bar chart on the right, what you'll see is we've really seen growth kind of exponentially. Started slow in 2016, ramping on up. In 2019, we saw as many transactions as had been done cumulatively the prior 3 years. And in spite of COVID this year, we've seen several projects close and several in the pipeline that we expect to close before the end of the calendar year. So we're optimistic that this financing tool is meeting a need and that many property owners are taking advantage of it. Similar to the national picture, about half of the projects we see in Texas are energy efficiency, about a third here are water conservation, and then under the distributed generation category, about 12%, and that includes mostly things like rooftop solar, which there's a huge untapped opportunity here in Texas. As far as the types of properties that we're seeing improved, about 30% commercial and retail, followed by hotels, commercial office space, nonprofits, multifamily, a whole mix. A little bit of industrial, and we think the industrial piece is probably going to start growing significantly. So some of the drivers, and this is related to the commercial energy sector. This chart from the United States Energy information administration. If you look at the red line that goes up pretty dramatically there from 1950 to 2010, that is electricity consumption in the commercial sector. The line just under it, that's sort of brown colored, is natural gas. So consumption is going up in the space. 50% of overall U.S. energy consumption is consumed in the commercial sector, and 75% of electricity consumed is used to heat, cool, and light and otherwise operate buildings. So it's a very significant piece of the overall energy consumption pie, so to speak, and a huge opportunity. A lot of the buildings or built infrastructure that you see around us was constructed at a time when perhaps energy codes were not as stringent as they are today. And so there are very significant retrofit opportunities in some of the older buildings, even built in the 80s and up and through the 90s. And then as you have equipment needing to be replaced, requiring maintenance and so forth, those projects also can be very, very good candidates for PACE financing. The challenge we have in Texas and elsewhere, but specifically in Texas, is that we have pretty low energy costs. The line chart on the right is, again, from the Energy Information Administration. And while it does show those costs going up, our average cost for commercial, again, is the red line, and is hovering there about 10 cents an all-in cost. That compares to other states. California is more in the 20 to 30 cents. Northeast, again, higher, 20 to 30 cents. So if you're trying to justify an energy savings project on avoided cost, it's tougher to do here because our unit cost for power is lower. The map on the left, and this is just something I took a look at this morning and thought it would be interesting. When we talk about low energy prices in Texas, you can't get lower than negative. And this is an actual snapshot of wholesale prices in Texas this morning at 8:40, time-stamped. And the bar chart on the right, you can see the scale goes from a high of $35 per megawatt hour, so that's 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour, to a negative of 55, which is 5.5 cents, so minus 5.5 cents. And if you look at these different pricing points across Texas, at 8:40 this morning, some places you were going to be paid 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour for taking their electricity because there was a surplus. So again, the financing based on avoided costs in Texas is challenging, and that's why many projects remain, unaddressed. Some of the trends we're seeing, this is even pre-COVID, owners of commercial real estate are repurposing and are repositioning assets. In some cases, it may be you're converting an abandoned warehouse to a combination lofts plus commercial space plus retail. It could be that you have a Class A, Class B office space where you don't anticipate tenants will be needing as much space as they have going forward, and there's an opportunity to shift some of that space into different use. That's going to involve a certain level of MEP work, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing work, and PACE could be used for that work as a component of the overall financing for the project. The other thing is that companies are increasingly focused on what's called ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. There are over 600 buildings, commercial buildings in the U.S. with a zero energy certification. A energy savings project, a water savings project, like those that are funded through PACE, those benefits could accrue to those ESG goals that are outlined in corporate policy. And then we're keenly aware now of the need for health-related upgrades, touchless systems, which could have an energy-related component, UVC, LED lights that have a germicidal benefit with separate circuits could be installed to treat spaces when they're unoccupied. That can have an energy component that could qualify for PACE, and then enhanced air filtering and treatment. So these are things that are not necessarily driven by energy needs, but health needs, and they do have energy benefits and an energy relationship, and could again be financed through PACE. Some of the barriers we see in the C&I space, lack of upfront capital, PACE addresses that. A focus on short-term financing. With PACE, you can finance equipment for 20 years plus, depending on the life of the equipment. Lack of funding. PACE provides 100% financing, or it can, and it's not a personal or business loan. The landlord split incentives. This is an operating cost that can be passed on to tenants through rental agreements. And then also, if you're a commercial property owner, and typically you hold an asset for, say, 3 to 5 years, so there's a disincentive to make these improvements, the PACE benefits and the PACE assessment transfer at the time of sale. And if they're not paid as part of the negotiation at the transfer. So the first owner that initiates the PACE project gets its benefits. The second owner gets its benefits and pays the assessment associated with those, and so on and so on. So helps overcome the short-term ownership issue as well. This is an interesting study, I believe was done maybe 10 years ago. USA Real Estate, understanding that they had lots of properties with energy projects that remained unfunded or lack of activity on, they started to dive into, okay, what's really happening here? And some of the barriers they address, and this is within their own organization, is that typically capital was allocated to things that were more visible, tenant improvements, leasing commissions, things like that. And that energy projects sort of fell to the wayside because mechanical systems are behind the walls. They're not they don't draw the sort of attention that some of these others do. Also, energy projects tend to have a longer payback, as we've already talked about, and they're complicated to implement. And if they were not underwritten when the asset was purchased or developed, then addressing them later meant that spending that capital lowered the investor dividends and yields. And so from a financial standpoint, significant barriers there that were preventing projects. So USA came up with a proprietary calculator, a spreadsheet, and they called it their Building Upgrade Value Calculator. And it was designed to convert the efficiency benefits into financial metrics so that decision makers could understand if purely from a financial standpoint, these projects made sense. The outcome of that tool was more projects got funded across their entire portfolio. They recognized and realized actual energy savings that were significant. And also, there was a better connection between the energy efficiency of the building and understanding the asset value. So they said, well, this is a good thing. While it's proprietary, we think others could benefit. So they partnered with the US EPA through Energy Star and made a public version of this calculator, which is available online. I'll show you the link here in a moment. And so it tracks things like it turns energy projects into return on investment metrics, IRR, net present value, and then also looks at it from the perspective of how could the project qualify and achieve a higher Energy Star rating. So the tool is here, Building Upgrade Value Calculator. There's the link. You can Google it. It's pretty easy to find. And it's a spreadsheet. You can see the tabs at the bottom. Really kind of a menu-driven tool that requires certain inputs and then delivers certain outputs, even in a format where it will put together a report sort of tailored to different audiences. So an excellent tool to help validate and quantify those building savings opportunities. The types of improvements that are eligible for PACE, and this is just a sample to give you an idea, but again, projects that reduce energy or water usage or generate energy on site are eligible. On the energy side, you see things that you would expect: mechanical system modernization, HVAC controls, renewable energy systems. On the water side, fixtures, water recovery and reuse, water management systems, and irrigation. Any of these sorts of things potentially could qualify for PACE financing. The other thing that you can roll into the cost of a project are soft costs. So it's reasonable to expect that you're going to have materials, labor, different fees, application, inspections, et cetera, project engineering fees that are directly associated with the PACE project. Those that are associated with the project itself can be rolled into the financing. If it is a larger renovation or retrofit project, say it's a $50 million project and $10 million of it is PACE related, and you have associated soft costs with the whole project, then a proportionate amount of the overall project soft costs could be financed through PACE. So that's one thing that sometimes gets overlooked in the initial calculation, but this is designed, again, to provide 100% financing to make it more appealing for the owner to make these investments. So why Texas PACE and why this is different? If you look at the conventional financing scenario, assuming you don't have the capital or have a priority for that internal capital for other projects, you're going to be borrowing it. And a typical equipment loan is short term, 5 years, maybe max. These days, about 5.5% interest. And so the lender, if it's a commercial bank or another lender, expects that they get their money back within a pretty short period. Well, that means that the repayment is higher than the avoided cost or the utility savings for the duration of those payments. So there's a disconnect, a disincentive. You're cash flow negative at that point for the term of repayment. With PACE, it changes that metric. It basically knocks that repayment tower on the side and better aligns it with utility savings over time. And that's allowed, again, by the security of the assessment mechanism associated with PACE. So there you can be cash flow positive day one. Interest rates are about comparable to a standard equipment loan, but you can realize benefits immediately. That's why what makes PACE different. If you look at the financial impact in a sample, this is a project, a little over $1 million, savings $125,000 a year projected. And the blue bar that goes up is the PACE project. So you can see in this illustration that from day one, you're cash flow positive. We have this calculator tool available on our website. You can plug in your own numbers, do your own calculations, and look at the differences there. The other two options that are calculated, the self-funded, there you go negative because you've expended a certain amount of internal capital. And then in this scenario, it takes about 8.5 years to become cash flow positive. And then if you're borrowing it, you have a certain amount of down payment that's required for these loans, typically probably 20%. And then you go cash flow positive. So with the PACE arrangement, you can be cash flow positive day one. In a lease scenario, if this is a commercial property that's for lease, a couple of things to point out here. Again, this is a $1.3 million PACE project example. Self-funded, you invest the 1.3 with a conventional loan. That's a 20% down. With PACE, it can fund 100%. And if you move down to cash flow impact in year one, what you see is you're positive there, $86,000 in year one. Year two, your cash flow positive even more, and your years to project cash flow positivity is immediate versus 6.5 years for self-funded or 8.5 years for conventional. Taking it down to the bottom and looking at the net present value, 10 years, the PACE funded option significantly higher in year 10, and then 20 years higher than the other two options as well. So purely from a financial standpoint, setting aside the project needs, the other benefits, the improved lighting, the improved temperature control, the tenant comfort, the things like that the project will deliver, this is a very positive financial play. So next we're going to look at the structure of PACE and its authorization and how it's implemented. So how did we get here? As I mentioned, in 2013, the state legislature passed a bill, the PACE Act, that authorized local governments to identify PACE districts and create PACE programs in accordance with state law. There was not a secondary level of guidance provided by the legislature. That's pretty typical. Laws are generally fairly high level and somewhat vague in some areas. So into that void, the Texas, Keeping PACE in Texas, which helped get the PACE Act passed, created what's called PACE in a Box. This is a standard set of guidance that is designed to be compliant with state law, and any local government across the state can use this tool, provided for free, the PACE in a Box Toolkit, to implement their program. Very few really wanted to set up a new PACE operation, and so the Texas PACE Authority, our organization, was formed as a nonprofit to exclusively administer PACE programs on behalf of local government, essentially extended staff. And then we've developed guidelines that are really kind of a level deeper on how the programs actually work. So some key things to look at in the law itself: qualified improvement. We've talked about this a couple of times already, but the key things are underlined here. And it's a permanent improvement fixed to real property. And here, permanent means essentially the improvement needs to be in place and have a useful life at least as long as the assessment. So you might think, does permanent mean forever? In this case, it means it needs to align with the assessment. And then again, that it's intended to decrease water or energy consumption or demand, and it has to be on the customer side of the meter. Those are the key things here. And then the other, and this is really on the quality control side, we want the legislature wanted to ensure that if an owner was going to be financing a project over time, that the benefits would actually be there to offset the financing costs. And so for each project, a baseline has to be established. Water and energy savings verification has to happen that shows that the project meets the definitions of qualified project. Verification before and after the project is completed, and this has to be done by an independent third party. We'll talk more about this in a moment. The PACE in a Box Toolkit, as I said, was designed to be sort of that second layer of guidance and detail beyond the law itself. And Keeping PACE in Texas put together a number of different working groups to deal with different aspects of the PACE rollout. The two that are highlighted there, the underwriting standards, which is really the financial and the loan side, and then the technical standards, which is deals more with how we establish baselines, determine energy and water savings, and do it in a way that's replicable. Those are under review and update now. Things change over time, standards change, and so those are being updated. If you would like to be involved in providing input for those two updates, there's the link, and you can access that through Keeping PACE in Texas. And again, the idea here is we have 254 counties in the state, I think probably 1,200 cities, and endless sort of other special districts. If each of the cities and counties interpreted the PACE statute a different way, then we could have thousands of different PACE programs all operating differently. So PACE in a Box provides a uniform set of standards that can be used, and that way the local governments don't need to reinvent the wheel, and they have assurance that the program that's being operated meets the guidelines and requirements in state law. Again, the technical standards developed based on national accepted standards. This is not a from scratch kind of a blank sheet. Tied in the various things you would normally see as part of engineering assessments for commercial buildings. And then the ITPR, this is the independent third-party reviewer, which is, again, the quality control element here. Has to be a Texas licensed professional engineer with related experience in doing energy and water assessments. On the financial side, the underwriting metrics, these are a couple of the key things to pull out there, that the assessment to assess value ratio, or the loan to value ratio, has to be less than 20% of the assessed property value, and that is the property value as improved after the PACE project. This is validated by an independent appraiser, and if there is a need for a variance to that, those are considered on a case-by-case basis. The other key metric here on the financial side is that the savings to investment, the savings have to be greater than equal to, savings to investment ratio has to be greater than equal to 1. Obviously, you want the projects to spin off as much savings as there is debt service, so that equals out. So that's one of the metrics we looked at as well. And then the other is that if the property has an existing mortgage, then that mortgage holder must provide consent for the PACE loan. The PACE loan becomes a senior lien, sort of tax level status, even though it's not a tax. And so understandably, if a mortgage holder holds a mortgage, then they would want to be involved and understand the value of the PACE project. And we've had many mortgage holders provide consent. It improves, these projects improve their value of the asset they're financing. And they can also, the existing mortgage holder could be the lender for a PACE project as well. So a requirement, but not a barrier. A little bit deeper on the savings to investment ratio and how that's calculated, pretty straightforward. Looking at the savings, that's the total energy or water or related savings caused by the project for the life of the assessment, divided by the total cost. And that's, again, that can be the hard cost for the project plus the soft costs, the associated permitting and fees and other work. Utility incentives should be considered and should be pursued for all of these projects. The nature of a PACE project is that it's an energy or water savings project. Utility incentives are designed to achieve energy and water savings. And so in many cases, a PACE project may just automatically qualify or may meet those utility criteria. A utility incentive then can be considered like owner's contribution, owner's cash that can buy down the cost of the project. So very important to look for those. The example shown here, how the formula works, again, very straightforward. Say you have a project that's $1 million, including the financing costs, all the costs associated with the project. For HVAC and lighting improvements, you secure utility incentives for $50,000. The net cost is then $950,000 over a 20-year assessment term. The savings, $950,000 divided by the investment, net investment of $950, SIR of 1. This one would qualify. So anything 1 or greater would qualify. So moving on now to the sort of the local adoption and the local government role. Under state law, again, while this was enabled at the state level, the PACE programs themselves have to be created at the local level. So the steps involved in creating a local PACE program, and as I showed on the map earlier, we have 55 now this week that have gone through this process, is to first post a report on how the PACE program will work. This is on a public website so that members of the community can review that and provide comment. We have a template for that that's been used over and over throughout the state. Second, oftentimes a public hearing is requested to provide, again, a forum and more transparency before the city or county establishes the program. Then step 3 is a required step. They have to pass a resolution of intent to establish a PACE program. And then at a separate hearing later, they have to then pass a resolution to establish. Again, this provides an opportunity for members of the public, affected members of the community, other interested parties to provide comment. And then the last step is they select an administrator. Again, no city or county has really wanted to set up a PACE department. The nature of PACE transactions is they're very technical and the deal flow is lumpy. So if you set up a PACE division of your city or county, they're going to be very busy and then not very busy. So an administrator working across the state like us has the ability to provide services when needed throughout the state to different local governments. Again, the Texas PACE Authority, we work for local governments. We're an extension of their staff, and we work collaboratively with the property owners to walk them through the process with the capital providers and with the service providers as well. We're a nonprofit, a native Texan 501c3. So this is all we do. We administer PACE programs in the state of Texas and serve local governments. The guidelines, again, that we've developed, and I mentioned these earlier, are available here, but it walks you all the way through A to Z how the program works. We have this available in English and in Spanish, and we also have a number of other program documents on our website, and those are all linked here. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. So now let's look at the different roles in the project and the different participants in a PACE project. The general flow of how it works is that a building owner thinks, gee, I think I may have an opportunity here. I may have a project that fits the PACE parameters. So they find a contractor. They better define the scope. They select the projects. They then work with to find a capital provider. Again, any capital provider that they choose, and then they apply to the PACE program. That's an initial application. If all looks good, then there is a exchange of contracts. There's a lien placed on the property to secure the loan. This is with the owner's agreement. The capital provider supplies the funding. The contractors complete the project. And then in Texas, the owner sends the payments directly to the lender. In some other states, this may be added as a line item to a tax bill. But in Texas, that's not the case here. The owner is paying the lender directly with the enforcement of the assessment from the city or the county. The list of capital providers that we have on our website, again, this is, as of now, these are capital providers that have indicated that they want to work in Texas. Many of them have done projects. You see a little banner under several that have indicated they've completed a PACE project in the state, but this is not an exclusive list. If there is a different capital provider that an owner wants to work with, we certainly will consider adding them to the list. There are some kind of minimal financial requirements that we look for, but as you can see, we have a mix of specialty capital providers as well as banks and others. So many options there. The process on the projects goes like this. The owner selects the contractor and the independent third-party reviewer. Now, the contractor can do the initial analysis, but they are not then independent, and so there needs to be a third-party engineer involved as well. So working through the flow, the contractor first performs an energy and water analysis. We have a template for how that should be done. The independent third-party reviewer is engaged, and they provide a review, a desk review essentially, of those projected savings in the baseline scenario. Then it moves to project construction. Once the construction is completed, then the ITPR returns to the site to verify that the project, everything that was in scope, was installed properly and appears to be working as intended. There is not a guarantee involved. We've had that question before. There are some projects that get implemented in a turnkey fashion that then have a savings guarantee. That's not a requirement for PACE. Now, if an owner decides they want that, that could be a feature that they add to the project, but it's not a requirement. So the energy and water analysis, the first part of that, again, this can be performed by a contractor or engineer. Could be someone that works for the owner. Two key components: the baseline analysis, again, what is the current energy or water consumption picture of the building, and then what is the projected savings. We have a template, and then again, this cost, this is a soft cost that can be rolled into the project. Then the independent third-party reviewer, again, Texas licensed PE with relevant experience and certifications, has two roles. They review the baseline savings, the desk review, the projections, and then a site visit. Normally, this is done either by the engineer or someone they assign to go to the site and understand the current conditions pre-project. And then after site visit number 2, again, wanting to see that everything was installed properly as a quality assurance for the owner. So let's look at how this actually works and look at some different case studies. We've had a lot of different types of projects in the state, so urban and rural, mixed use, nonprofit, multifamily, et cetera, a mix of different measures, project sizes ranging from at the very lowest end, 68,000 to the largest being 24 million, and all have received 100% financing through PACE. The very first project done in the state of Texas was actually at a house of worship. Understandably, they have cash flow challenges, and they had needs. They had older equipment that had high maintenance costs, and were able to replace their HVAC and controls and reduce heat load with window film. They were also able to secure utility incentives through the local utility, Austin Energy, and then the savings from this project, 20% annually. And I always like to include this, not only because it's the first one, but to illustrate, I think when we say commercial and industrial, oftentimes nonprofits get overlooked, but a nonprofit facility is a commercial facility. And so this is a very good match. PACE is a very good match for nonprofits. A standard commercial building in Houston, this would be pretty typical, owned by an investor. HVAC, an older building that needed these upgrades, lighting, building control system, HVAC, $1.3 million at 38% savings annually. The Butler Brothers building in Dallas, if you look just to the right of that pond, that's Dallas City Hall. So that gives you a marker. This is right next to Dallas City Hall. An old warehouse that had been unused for a number of years was bought by an investor group and turned into loft apartments and a hotel. And it was a top to bottom renovation with a significant MEP component. $24 million for this project, and significant utility savings, 40%. What makes this project interesting is that the entire project, renovation project, was $116 million. And a portion of that, again, was MEP related. And if you look at the capital needs for a project like this, the blue column on the left is how the capital stack was arranged initially. So, and this is pretty typical. So senior debt, in this case, of about $50 million, historic tax credits, equity, and then to fill in that gap, they were securing a mezzanine loan for $22 million. That's very typical in a project like this. But the interest rate on that mezzanine loan was 15%. That's also very typical. The mezzanine financing is very expensive, and owners want to use as little of it as possible. So they were able to identify and sever off the components of the project that were PACE eligible, secure those through a PACE loan at 6%. And as you see on the far left highlighted, it brought the overall cost of capital for the project down 20%. So while PACE can fund 100% of an eligible project, it can also fund a component or a sliver like this in a larger redevelopment project. Outside of Austin, in the city of Elgin, they wanted to add solar panels to the roof. The building needed nothing else, so that was a pretty straightforward project, reducing their electricity consumption 26% annually. Here, just post Hurricane Harvey, there was very little rental apartment space or rental housing at all in the Rockport and Aransas County area. An owner took a site where they had a building already and added to it a very large apartment complex. And they opted to go above code. And so in a new construction scenario, we look at the existing energy code as the baseline, since there's no building there before, or no property to use as the baseline. And then we look at the difference between what's required by code and what's actually specified for the project. And in this case, they went above code for lighting, plumbing fixtures, and building envelope, which qualified the project. About a $3 million assessment and significant energy savings, again, and a higher performance overall building for the owner and the tenants. The Containery in Waco, this is pretty unique in the downtown area, where the silos, the Chip and Joanne Gaines facility, as well as there's a distillery. This is the largest reuse project of shipping containers. And here they renovated a building, they added the shipping containers. Different measures included HVAC and lighting and plumbing and roof insulation, about an $850,000 PACE project, and significant electric and water savings. The large mall operator, Simon Property Group, They were able to address 4 different properties in 4 different jurisdictions at the same time and roll this all into one PACE loan, addressing HVAC and lighting and water fixture needs. Altogether, the assessment was $9 million, but again, at different properties they owned in different multiple jurisdictions, so that sort of financing can be arranged. In Amarillo, an older downtown building that had significant historic value but had fallen into disrepair was purchased and renovated and turned into a boutique hotel. Here, lighting, building envelope, water efficiency, etc. They were able to secure historic tax credit financing and realize very significant energy savings from this project as well. So resources and follow-up as we're coming to a close. One thing we like to remind folks is that you hear win-win-win a lot. Well, this is actually a win-win-win-win-win. And that's because property owners benefit, lower energy bills, improve property and asset value. The contractors that are doing the work, this is a new opportunity for business. Many times they have a relationship with a customer. They propose a project and the customer says, great, we'd love to do it, but we don't have the money. And so this is a means of getting across that capital hurdle. For lenders, this could be a new loan product. Fully collateralized, stable, tax lien status, and improves the asset value that their financing is loaned against. More globally, at the state level, for every PACE project that is done, we're reducing electricity demand. That means on the hottest days of the summer, when the grid is overtaxed, that we're demanding less from it, and the chances of brownouts or things like that is reduced. Also in Texas, a lot of our electricity is generated using fuel-based generation, which means you have associated air emissions from those power plants. So we're indirectly helping improve air quality. And then it hasn't been a concern recently, but it wasn't that long ago that the entire state was in a major drought condition. And while we can make more electricity and we can generally find more energy, the water we have is the water we have. It just gets redistributed in an awkward way. Oftentimes we get too much when we don't need it and not enough when we do. So it's a means of helping on the demand side. And then for communities, if you have older abandoned or buildings that need upgrades and repair so that they can be revitalized and used, this is a great tool for that. And we're seeing we're seeing PACE used a lot really as an economic development tool and engine within these communities. So some key takeaways. On the financing side, not a balance sheet liabilities, land secured assessment. That's one of the major appeals. Does not tie up the company's line of credit. It's external third-party financing. You're adding value, you're increasing the performance of the assets themselves, interior comfort and indoor comfort, better lighting, better usefulness overall, utilization, utility. Does not have to be paid off at the time of sale because it's tied to the land. It conveys with ownership. And the key feature here can be paid off over a much longer stretch of time than a conventional equipment loan. Instead of a 5-year loan, 5, 10, 20, whatever the useful life of the equipment is. And as we've shown in some of the illustrations earlier, can be cash flow positive from day one. On the programmatic side, we realize this is complicated, but there's a lot of resources to help contractors and owners through the process. So you're not on your own with unfamiliar paperwork and documentation. We're here to help with that. Communities across the state are looking at PACE to achieve different objectives they may have. And this is going to vary locality by locality, but it addresses many of those. And can be used again to help drive new projects or maybe bring some back to the table for discussion that otherwise financially had been bumped off. So programmatic takeaways. Some of the resources we have, the Texas PACE Authority. Here's our main website. You can go, and everything I've talked about is listed there in different ways. If you run into a problem, we're happy to walk you through it. There's a lot on the website. Our technical standards are listed there. I've talked about these earlier. Under the events and training, that's where you'll find a recording of this webinar, as well as other materials, including videos, recordings of webinars, printed material, etc. And then soon we'll be having a self-paced online contractor training where any contractor can go through a 3-part training series. There will be a test at the end. If you achieve certain level of aptitude on that test, then we will say that you are a trained contractor, and we will list you on our website. So look for that. That's coming soon. The case studies that I've covered today are only a few. All the rest are on our website at this link below case studies, and we'll be adding more as those projects are completed. And then again, earlier I mentioned the EPA Energy Star Building Upgrade Calculator and walked through that. This was a tool that USA Real Estate developed and then made public in partnership with the EPA, and that link is there. So with that, we'll conclude for the day. And there's the nature of using Google Meet for webinars like this is the platform can get busy with Q&A. So please send questions you have to me at the address here, dub@texaspaceauthority.org. Again, we will answer the questions and we'll post those on our website, anonymize those so your name won't be by them, but probably if you have a question, someone else does too, and we will post those as well as the answers. And then if you've registered and attended today, you will be getting probably in the next week or so a certificate that documents that you did attend today, and you will get a professional development hour certificate, a survey, and then we'll provide slides that I've gone through today, as well as a link to where the recording will be. So with that, we'll end for the day. Thank you for attending, and look for more training opportunities and T5 webinars in the future. Thank you.